Hi, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Luella. I'm a therapist, I'm a coach, and I try to help people with their relationships as much as possible. So, I want to talk to you today about how faith and common sense can save your relationship. What am I talking about here? Well, let's start here. Let's say you get bad news. We all get bad news from time to time, right? Whether it's directly affected with our relationship or maybe it's something outside of our relationship. It could be a health scare, a job loss, or maybe your husband just forgets again, or worse, he just doesn't show up the way you needed him to. And your first instinct, you spiral, you lose the plot, right? You start playing detective maybe in your own mind. Why did this happen? Who's to blame for this? And most of all, how do I fix it? Like if there's one common statement that's often said when I'm working with individuals, it's like, I'm always in my head. I think too much. And to me, that's a sign of anxiety, really, right? I mean, yeah, that's not no surprise, but you have to think about it in terms of, you know, you're in your head trying to figure out something that's probably not something that you can really control or that you can fix. And sometimes, that's a hit to the ego when I say that to people. I kind of, like, who are you to think that you can fix this? Like you have the answer to everything. It's a bit of a perfectionist, a bit of a pride issue. We need to get more humble and we need to ask for help quite often. And you know what? This might be posed as, oh, helpless, hopeless, submissive, like, weak. I mean, no. I mean, no. I mean, seek professional help, but also seek solitude in the sense of maybe through prayer or, deep breathing, um, kicking your parasympathetic nervous system into gear rather than that fight or flight. That's what I mean. Pausing, responding after some time and not just reacting, right? Give yourself that space. It's a very modern problem. We're addicted to logic, but allergic to trust. So let's talk about that. Because what I've found over the decades of working with couples, and honestly, just from living, is this: it's not intelligence that saves your relationships. It's in those moments. It's the faith and a good dose of what I call common sense. Um, Both of those are nearly extinct. Let's go to the first reframe. We can't think our way out of every problem, even though we think we can. I mean, I know I've tried, I've been in my head overthinking something that's just completely a waste of time. And yeah, I've made this video because I'm guessing you have too. But we have to realize that when life hits us hard, thinking more often makes things worse because thinking without grounding, again, grounding in trust, grounding in faith, grounding in common sense, you know, without that, it turns into storytelling. And our stories, well, they're usually laced with fear. Because to me, anxiety is synonymous to fear, and trust and faith is the opposite, which is love. You go from he forgot to call to he doesn't care or my favorite, like this relationship, it's not working. It's never meant to work. We're not good. It just spiral under like 5 seconds. And your brain wants to protect you, right? So it intervenes, like well, I mean, it invents villains and it plays out the worst case scenarios. Like, you almost become like you're prepping for some sort of battle to take place. But that's not clarity. That's panic dressed up in logic. You can think of it that way. Here you think, oh, you're on top of things, you're figuring it all out. But really you're panicking. So, and like I said, common sense steps um well in like a kind of a grandmother and says, "Sweetheart, breathe for a second. You don't need to have an answer right now." And when you do that, that's when faith comes in. Not necessarily religious faith, but trust, faith and perseverance and resiliency. Like trust is something bigger than your egos need to be, right? Like, let's try this again. Trust is your ego's need to be right or in control. Faith instead gently asks, what does this moment actually require of me? Pausing. And sometimes the answer isn't fixing it, it's just waiting or not reacting or saying a quiet prayer instead of launching into a 12-minute lecture, at somebody. So, another reframe I like to bring forth is control is not clarity, especially in marriage. And women, we love our control. We love taking control. If I had $1 for every woman I worked with who says, I just want to help him, but she's just controlling the whole situation, the whole house, his life. Um, yeah, if yeah, it's crazy. So we say we're helping, but often what we're doing is micromanaging because deep down, we don't trust him to get it right, whether that's our spouse or our child. Um, that's why, women often say, oh, I have 3 children. And I'll be like, what do you mean? You said you had twins. Oh, well, my husband. It's just like, I find that a little degradatory, like, I mean, are you that great, that like you are the know all be all sort of thing of the family, that he's helpless without you? Come on. You know, but here's the rub. The more you take care of everything, the less your partner feels needed. And that's not good. The more he'll step back and feel less masculine. And that is not what we need in society. We need men to step forward and be what they're meant to be, a man. Like common sense says you're not his mother, you're not his life coach, you're his wife. And it's best that you take that role, the role that you best play, you know. And faith, well, faith says you don't need to understand him completely to love him well. Let him be his own person and you be yours, you know. Some of the most healing moments in a relationship doesn't come from deep soul bearing talks, as you often hear. They come from shutting your mouth basically and softening your heart. I'm all about silence, a lot of silence in a marriage, just being present with one another, complimenting one another, you know. um Another reframe I like to present is feeling uncertain doesn't mean you're doing it wrong, you know? And this one's a little personal to me. I mean, I used to believe that if something felt chaotic or heavy, it must mean I made a mistake. Nope, that's not the truth. Some of the best decisions I've ever made felt horrible at first. Because real love, the kind that stretches you, brings tension. It feels very uncomfortable, in fact. I want you to think of marriage like a dance. It is so much like a dance, you know, two people with their own bruises, needs, and pride trying to move as one. You guys, that's not a spreadsheet. It's very like non-analytical. That's not a TED Talk. That's a daily surrender to one another, a daily sacrifice. What common sense does is it reminds us hard doesn't mean wrong. Confusing doesn't mean broken. And faith whispers, you're not alone. Let the storm pass before you tear down the boat. Allow that storm to pass, allow those gray clouds to come in and leave. They will. So let me leave you with this. In a world obsessed with overthinking, overcorrecting, and overfunctioning, common sense has become sacred, very scarce. I've come to believe that I like to call it more like it's sacred sense. It's the fruit of a heart that's aligned with something bigger than fear. Comparison, that's a big one nowadays in couples. Or ego, your own pride. You don't need more credentials. You don't need to be a better communicator, as many of my couples seem to think. It's all about communication. Sometimes you just need to shut up. Sometimes you just need to pause to notice what's actually happening in this dynamic, not what your fear is narrating, the little demons in your head. That's what fear is. And maybe the holiest thing you can do in a moment of relationship chaos is to say, I don't know, but I'm here. You don't need to always have the answers. Hey, we're going through a hard time right now, but I'm here for the long run. Just that simple statement is like, we've had some really rough months lately, but you're not getting rid of me. Like, I'm sorry. I'm committed to this relationship. So I'm going to show up every single day. That is common sense because you signed up for this. You've committed to this relationship. That's what faith is. Marriage is a covenant. It's not a contract, and that might just be the moment your relationship begins to heal, quite honestly. So I hope that's helpful. If you are an overthinker, if you are one of those people who think you can solve it all, step back from your ego. See the pride in yourself. Take some time to say a little prayer every morning. Be patient. Wait in that stillness. Allow time to pass. And you'll see how powerful that truly is. All right. Let me know if this was helpful. Talk to you soon.